Hello, Todd. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Chris. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
I want to introduce you to Todd Bergert, whose art I'm a big fan of. What's really interesting is Todd's art is so polished, I was surprised that creating art is not his primary job. Todd is a lawyer, and I think it's important to spotlight artists who can show other artists that you can master your craft even though you make a living in another field. And before we start, Todd, where can people see your work?
Sure. Let's see. I have a page on Facebook called Creatively Todd Bergert Art. And then on Instagram, Todd Bergert Fine Art. I figured if I added that word fine, that would be a really good thing. And then in person, I'm in two galleries, the Dog and Horse Gallery in Charleston, South Carolina, and then in the Grand Bohemian Gallery, and that's in Savannah, Georgia.
Fantastic. And listeners, please connect with Todd, and I appreciate if you hit the subscribe and like button for our show. So Todd, here's my first question. And I usually don't think of a combination of lawyers and artists being one of the same, yet you are one.
Right. Yeah, you're right. That's kind of a interesting combo. You're right. You don't usually, it seems like, and I know this is a generalization, but it's a left brain versus right brain thing. And there's usually not too many lawyers that do that, or vice versa, I guess.
Yeah, please tell us about your background and just tell me, was there even a crossroads where you had to decide whether you're going to pursue a career in art or become a lawyer? Just tell me more about it.
Yeah, no, fortunately that was never an issue. So it's kind of a weird, I guess, background. I am mid-50s and never painted, or I wasn't one of those kids that doodled or anything. There's always, and I'm guessing every grade school has those kids, that there was a couple really great artists and everybody else just thought, well, I just am not a good artist or whatever. So I never did any art other than the usual classes that one takes in high school, whatever. And I have four daughters, and I guess as my daughters got older, they're very active in sports. All of a sudden, when I was about late 40s, they're not playing sports, going on to college and graduating. And all of a sudden, for the first time in 20 years, I have time for myself. And I am probably one of the few lawyers that is terrible at golf. I tried to golf, kind of basically tried for several years to find a hobby. And I'm just terrible. And my dad would take me out, and I think he was pretty embarrassed. So I just realized I am not a golfer. I'm trying to do it because everybody else does it. I hate it. And so I tried a number of different hobbies. My wife signed me up for guitar lessons, and I took them for about 2 years, and I would have stopped after about 6 months, but I'm not good at breaking up. So I felt bad and kept going and just never practiced. Was not good. I think I tried, Buddy and I, like a whole winter refurbished old canoe. So I tried some old woodworking stuff, collect baseball cards, but that doesn't take up much time. And then just randomly, probably I started 4 years ago. So I guess a little over 4 years ago, I guess George W. Bush's artwork kind of came on my radar, and Anthony Hopkins. And again, obviously, I forget what George W. Bush did, but I know art wasn't his main thing. But I thought, hey, if this guy can paint and Anthony Hopkins can paint, that'd be kind of cool to take a painting lesson. And so I just Googled local painting classes and really got lucky because I signed up for class at the Canton Museum of Art. I live in Canton, Ohio. And the guy that teaches it is just a master. I didn't really appreciate it at the time, but I just fell in love with it. And it's realism type painting, which I guess does go with the lawyer part of me, because I see a lot of artists' work and hang around other artists now. And I just really appreciate it because I cannot do anything other than realism. I'm constantly amazed with these guys and ladies that can just kind of doodle and come up with creatures and everything out of their head. And that's just not me. So I guess in some ways it really did kind of line up with what I do. And I've been doing it for about 4 years now and love it. Probably do it too much, my wife says, but still have the full-time lawyer job. So that's good.
I really don't even know where to start. I'm in amazement. You've only been doing art for 4 years and you have two galleries that have your work. And this is just not a typical art story. I just don't hear stories like this where somebody starts at 4 years and represented by two galleries and create the art that you create. Were you amazed by what you were producing yourself?
And I know any way I answer this is going to, hopefully I don't sound conceited, because I will give credit to, if I had signed up, I think taken another class with other people, because I know obviously there's a lot of art teachers out there. I don't think it would have clicked, but the gentleman I took lessons from, I'm telling you, everybody in his class used to see just people that had never taken an art class before, never painted, and almost to a fault, every one of those people could display in a in a show and get in a show. I mean, he just pushes people, and he's not just as funny because I haven't been a student for 30 years, 35 years since law school. And so I was a little taken aback, when he'll come around and, I'm thinking I'm doing pretty good. He'll look at it. No, that doesn't look like, and he would just kind of no punches pulled. But boy, when he did it right, he was really complimentary. And so anybody that he teaches has done wonderful. There's a local show here in Stark County, and it draws from our whole county. And surprisingly, there's a lot of good artists in the area. But the last 5 years of the show, and this is obviously hundreds of people that apply, but the last 5 years, every one of his students has won. So I got lucky.
What?
And he's a good teacher.
Can we plug his name in?
Yeah, his name is Frank Dale. He is in his late 80s now, I guess. Paints every day. And he's a huge fan of Vermeer. And I'm not an art historian. I could probably name off, if you push me, 5 different artists, because I just have never studied it. But anyways, he was a big fan of Vermeer, who does the Flemish style, I think, layer after layer after layer. And I think when he was 83, he decided to paint all the Vermeers. And I guess there's 35 or 36 Vermeers in 2 years. And this guy's just a machine. Had his own show with all the painting. So again, very fortunate. And I also take lessons from a local lady here, Erin Mulligan. She's a local artist, has a nice Facebook page, and she's another student of Frank's, a former student of Frank's, and she does wonderful work too. So luckily I've had some really good teachers.
I want to ask you, your sports art really grabbed my attention. I'm a sports junkie. And listeners, please check out his Ty Cobb and especially your Jim Thorpe painting. It's masterfully done. Why an interest and why an interest to paint sports art?
That's a good question. You can probably tell from looking at my page. I seem to kind of jump around, and that's good and bad because I'll get on a kick. I think my first kick was kind of on animals, because surprisingly, one of the hard things, at least I think, as a realism painter, is to find photos that you can reference. Again, I don't think too many painters that do realism just come out of these, just paint out of their head. So I always use a reference photo. And again, my teacher teaches that. So I've gone from animals and then I finally landed on some sports paintings. I follow a gentleman on Twitter, Greg Kreinler, I think is his name. And he just does all these old, fantastic players that, nowadays most people have never heard of, and I love them. And I thought, this is great. I don't have to deal with the photos old enough. You don't also have to deal with copyright issues, which is nice. Mm-hmm. So grew up in Canton. Again, Jim Thorpe, every kid in town knows who Jim Thorpe was. So I decided to paint him first. Really like that. And then, just old baseball cards. Again, I've always collected baseball cards and collected old ones. And so that was just kind of a perfect fit, and there's a decent market for it too. That's kind of the nice, surprising thing. I have a buddy who has a huge collection, and kind of told me, hey, if you paint, Ty Cobb or Babe Ruth, some of the famous players, you might have a market for it. So, and I've enjoyed it. I really enjoy painting anything. So I'm working on a bunch of Babe Ruth now and Ty Cobb, working on too many at one time, it seems.
Sounds like you're letting us into your process. Sounds like you jump around from painting to painting, and maybe you could dive into your process and how long it takes to do one of these pieces.
It takes probably about 50 hours, so it takes a long time. And it gets, I don't know if this is just me or if it's common with people that are artists, but I get so excited about a painting, and I'll see something, I'll see an old photo, or, another painting, and I think, oh gosh, that looks great. I think I'd like to try painting something like that. And then about halfway in, when it's not quite so fun anymore, it's hard to finish. And so I think, well, I'll start another one, and then the kind of process keeps repeating itself. So sometimes I do have a hard time finishing, but it takes just a long time. And I think if I remember my college courses well enough, it's kind of the law of diminishing returns. At the beginning, when you're sitting down and painting, you can really see a difference, in the progress you made since you sat down just 2 hours ago. But at the end, when you're working for 2 hours and you take a before and after picture, sometimes it's kind of hard to even tell which is the before and after. So it's a long process. And I think it's different. Again, I don't claim to be an expert with painting techniques, but I think most people don't do that Flemish technique, which is just layer and layer, layer. They just kind of, paint an area and finish, and then move on to another area. So, it really, the Flemish technique does give a nice, vibrant color, and I think looks great when it's done right, but it does take a long time.
So let me understand this correctly. You may be in your 40th hour painting a particular piece. Let's say it's Babe Ruth, and you can step away from that and start another project or continue on another project, and you may come back around to the Babe Ruth a week later or 2 weeks later.
Yeah, usually about a week or two. And then sometimes I've had, I'm kind of standing in my art room right now and looking at some that have sat there for a couple years, and I don't know if I ever finish it. I just kind of lost interest, or my wife will come down. Sometimes I'll get encouraged or discouraged by people. They'll say, and then I kind of lose my steam, or somebody will say, well, why don't you finish this? And then I kind of get excited about it again and finish it. So yeah, I've got probably 6 baseball paintings going on, and whiskey and cigar painting and some other animals. And so, yeah, I'm jumping around, but it is kind of nice because I know people that do the same technique that will only work on one painting at a time. And if they don't feel like painting, then they just don't do anything. Whereas for me, it works because if sometimes I don't feel like painting, but I do feel like drawing. So I feel like, I'll work on the drawing phase of the painting, because I have to get the drawing right before I start painting. So I feel like I'm always doing something, maybe not the most efficient, but it works. Works for me at least.
How did your family feel about your converting, I'm assuming here, a part of your home into a studio? And how does that look like?
Yeah. Well, at first when I started doing it, I just kind of set up in the basement. And there was like a solitary light above me, and they just kind of rolled their eyes like, okay, here goes Dad again. He was working on a canoe last year, and he was doing this the year before. And so they really didn't think I'd stick with it. In fact, a lot of times during the first year, I kind of heard, oh, you're still painting, huh? And they were kind of surprised. And now I think they realize, okay, this is a passion. And I think, he's sticking with it and seems to enjoy it just as much now as he did 4 years ago. So they were surprised, and we have since finished our basement. So I have my own little area where I can just kind of make a mess and, not destroy the rest of the house with paints.
Does a part of you feel like you wish you found this passion many, many years ago, or you just understand that I found it 4 years ago and that's perfect?
Yeah, at first I did think that. I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I'm 50 and I finally found something I like doing. Like you said, I wish I had done this years ago, but it may not have been the right time. And again, I think if I had signed up for a different course with maybe somebody else, it wouldn't have been something I liked, and maybe the teacher wouldn't have pushed as much, or it would have been a technique that, because there's a lot of different painting techniques and different styles and mediums and everything like that. And it may not have been something I liked. So I think I'm afraid if I had tried it earlier, I just wouldn't have liked it. So I think it kind of came along at the right time, or, I had some time to dedicate to it, because I would have hated to, when the kids were younger, if I had been putting in as much time painting as I, then as I do now, I wouldn't have gone to games and that. So just kind of worked out.
I'd love to know how you decide what or who to paint. I mean, because in addition to your sports art, I really love your circus top. That piece and your David Bowie
thanks.
piece. Yeah, you also painted David Bowie. And that painting is so dynamic because you use colors to make his face. So a couple questions. How do you decide what and who to paint? And also, do you push boundaries of your style? Do you usually explore other typically art styles in paintings?
It's funny that David Bowie one was the only time I did feel like I pushed the style, because again, as you can look at the other stuff, it doesn't, it's kind of the old hidden, I forget what that magazine was, but is which one does not belong is definitely the David Bowie painting. The colors are a lot brighter. It's just a completely different style. But there was a David Bowie show here in Canton, and I was asked to be in it. And I was tempted just to, just paint a typical portrait. And I thought I'd like to try something different. And so I took a black and white photo and kind of put it through an Andy Warhol type of app where I could mess with the colors, and kind of liked the results. And I liked how it turned out. And I'm currently doing a Mick Jagger one too, the kind of the same style.
Oh, wow.
So
that's going to be cool.
I hope so. My friend Erin that is one of the people that teaches or gives lessons, she kind of says, and I think it's true, that sometimes there's this ugly adolescent phase with paintings, where you'll get through it, eventually it'll look good, But when it's in that phase where you're like, ugh, it's tough to see it sometimes. But I think once you do it long enough, you realize, okay, this is just part of the process where I'm not excited about it anymore. And I've heard the same thing from authors. I've heard authors say the best ideas they have for new books is in the middle of a book they're currently writing, So I think it's probably pretty common. Yeah. And just as far as getting ideas go, I think I would say I'm really on social media a lot and just kind of paying more attention to other painters. But where I often get the ideas from is photographers. I've been pleasantly surprised with the photographers that don't know me from Adam that I've reached out to and said, hey, I'm a painter, and would you mind if I, use one of your subjects to paint? And I think everyone I've reached out to has said yes. And a lot of those are on my Instagram page too. The fox painting, I think there's a portrait of a young lady with a lot of freckles, and a real pretty lady, and the photographer Sterling Mills was kind enough to say, yeah, go ahead. So I've been really surprised at how artists will kind of help out other artists.
It sounds like you just decide on who or what to paint just based on interest.
Yes, right. Yeah, every once in a while I'll get a commission, and quite honestly, I don't like commissions. I know a lot of artists like them, and it's kind of the bread and butter. I just don't like them. I'm not good at negotiating money, and I hate that part of it in dealing with just somebody directly, which is really nice to be in a gallery because I don't have to do that. And I think there's a lot of pressure too. I mean, it's one thing if somebody walks in a gallery and says, oh, that circus tent one, I really like that. I'd like to buy that. But for somebody to say, hey, will you paint my dog? And you do it and you give it to them, and everybody's usually very kind. Oh, yeah, I really like it. It's very nice. You deep down, you kind of never know. And you always suspect, do they really like it as much as what they said? So I just don't like doing commissions. So I usually would just look for something I like to paint. And then if nobody else wants to buy it, or the gallery doesn't want it for whatever reason, it doesn't match their style, then I wouldn't mind having it on my own walls. In fact, my wife we've had a couple paintings that she really liked, and kind of wants me to keep them, and sometimes I will, and sometimes I'll ship them to the gallery, whatever.
Let's piggyback on that. You already have a successful career as a lawyer. Is it important for you to grow your personal brand, and when you don't depend on your creativity to make money?
Personal brand, I'm assuming in the art world?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I'm in a nice position where this isn't my full-time job, and I don't rely on it for money. Anything extra is nice, and I certainly won't turn it down. So I have a little more luxury and just kind of, if I sell it, great. And if not, or I kind of paint what I want. And again, I think some people that are full-time artists, because I've started hanging around some, and there's kind of a group of people I just didn't happen to run in the same circles as, I do see where it's different. I appreciate how hard I think it would be to be a full-time artist and rely on that. So yeah, I've been making more of an effort, because I think one thing I'm decent at is, I've had my own law practice for 30 years, and I think you have to be a good business person too. Basically, if you're the best lawyer in town, but if you're not getting clients in the door, that doesn't mean a whole lot, And I think similarly, you could be a great artist, and if selling your work is something you want to do, if you're not doing the things to get to that point, then it doesn't really do any good to be a good artist, if that makes sense. And hopefully that doesn't sound too judgmental, but I know people that are great artists and just have no idea about marketing their stuff or whatever. And so I'm not saying I'm good at it, but I try to make more of an effort now on Facebook and Instagram. And, I think I realized too, obviously galleries want to sell their stuff, and I think they want to see somebody who is decent at trying to market and help them, in that process as well.
Let's jump into that. I see you're represented by, you say, a couple of art galleries. Can you tell us how you partnered with them and the entire experience?
Yeah. So it never really occurred to me. And about 2 years ago, I think it was, I have a friend who's a fantastic artist, and she's in a financial position that she doesn't have to sell her art. She just kind of does it for herself. And we as a group just enter shows together. And that's how I got to know these people. It was a nice competitive thing where you can kind of get in shows, and I think it ups your game and things like that. So I know these people from shows and common teachers. But anyways, one time she came back from Florida, and she had mentioned just walking into a gallery and showing them her stuff. And, and they said, hey, we'd like to represent you. And she hasn't done that yet, but I'd never thought about it. And again, the business part of me thought, hey, if you can be represented in a gallery where the places you go to on vacation or whatever, you could also write off the trip. You kind of have a 2-for-1 thing, a nice vacation and then stop in and see the gallery. So we go down to Charleston a decent amount. And so I just Googled Charleston galleries. And at the time, I think about half my paintings were dogs and horses. And interestingly, there's a gallery called the Dog and Horse Gallery. So I thought, oh, this is right up my alley. But I had no idea how to go about contacting galleries. And I think from hearing your other podcast interviews, I think that's, again, a common thing. So I just called them. And I think like most galleries, they say, well, we're pretty full. We don't have much room, but, sure, we'll take a look at your stuff. And luckily, they thought that my work did go with their gallery, and they were very nice to work with and have been excellent, really nice people. And so I've been down there for a couple years. And then this second one I'm in, my daughter and her husband happened to stop at the gallery in Savannah on a vacation and took some pictures of the gallery. And this is just a beautiful gallery that had just opened, but I think part of a 7. I think the other gallery, there's 7 sister galleries, if that makes sense. And this one, though, had just opened. And so I just contacted them and again, got lucky. But I don't want to make it appear that these are the only 2 galleries I contacted and I got in both, because I've certainly, after that first one, I thought, well, this is easy. And then I contacted probably about a dozen more by way of internet or, email or Instagram or Facebook. And, half the time they didn't even reply, or I got the response of, we're full, but maybe if there's an opening, we'll keep your stuff on file. So I think it's hard. There's limited space to get in, but I also think it's doable. There's enough galleries out there. I think if they think they can sell your stuff, they'll, I think, make room for you if there's a possibility of that.
Yeah, I was just thinking to myself, this is going to be an interesting question, because I think of lawyers, as great communicators. They're not intimidated, obviously. But did you ever feel a sense of intimidation trying to promote your work and reach out to galleries?
Yeah, I did. The lawyer part of me wants to say, oh, no, not at all. I think anybody, if they're truthful there's always that sense of rejection and wanting people to like your stuff. And, and although I like what I'm doing, I've had, been in shows where somebody will walk by and think that just painting realism, they'll kind of put it down. Not to my face, but you basically like, hey, why don't you just photocopy it? What's the point? You can just take a photo of it, and they're producing something that looks completely different than my stuff. So I guess not everybody likes it. So I'm always a little nervous or getting in a show, wanting to be validated by a judge or selling stuff to feel like my stuff is good. So I'm still in that a little bit of insecure phase, and I'm hoping that passes. I'm feeling better about it. And again, from talking with people that have been artists a lot longer than me, that enter shows as well, they'll say, hey, you can be rejected from a show, and then the next one you apply to, you could win best in show. And to tell you the truth, I thought they were just kind of exaggerating. And then I saw it happen twice, I believe, where I know somebody got rejected and their piece got in the second show and they won best in the whole show. So I think it's just so subjective. One person, one juror, one customer can say meh when they see your stuff, and another could love it.
I wanted to ask this question before I forget. What really I'm in awe of are the paintings you've done of your family. 2 that stand out.
Thanks.
Yeah, are the paintings of your daughters for her first horseback riding lesson painting, and the other one is your niece, Claire. Please tell us, why is it important for you to take the time to paint your family?
Yeah, so that was, at the beginning when I had just been assigned paintings when we're in class or whatever. I kind of, you always are thinking, oh, whenever I can paint or whatever I can paint. Of course, naturally, you think of your family. The funny thing is I decided to paint my wife first. And let me tell you, that was a big mistake. She's a teacher, so I made the mistake of using her school photo. So that was strike one. And this is probably only about painting after 6 months. I think probably about 6 months I painted her. And I just thought, this looks spot on. It's like looking at a mirror, honey. Can't you see this? And, she would just you could tell she wasn't that excited about it. In fact, we still joke because I got it framed. I spent like $150 on a nice frame, and it's only it was a 5x7, I think. And every time I walked by, it was on in the foyer on a table. It was face down. And I literally thought somebody kept accidentally knocking into this painting and knocking it down. And of course, I'm sure you figured out, which I was too dumb to figure out at the time, that it was her. And now I look back at it and think, ugh, you won't see that on my Instagram page, you know? So the first one I felt like I did a good job on was my niece, Claire. It was I'd been painting for a year because I started December of 16 and December of 17. I have a much younger sister, and she had her first baby. I think Claire was a year old at that time. So she said, hey, could you, for your Christmas present, could you paint me the one of my daughter? And I did, and I was a little nervous about it.
You hit that out of the park. I'll be honest with you. Because you have the side-by-side paintings, and you just captured that essence. But I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to let you know.
No, you're fine. No, you're fine. In fact, it probably ties in because I just thought when they opened it up, everybody was at, like most family gatherings, you're at, everybody's watching it, and I'm nervous and kind of waiting for that reaction. And I could tell it meant a lot to her. And I've never done anything that has anything good that's evoked emotions like that from somebody. And it just really meant a lot to me. And so, I decided I better paint the rest of my family too. So we have 4 daughters. So I painted one, and then I thought, okay, I have to paint the rest of them. And then the one with my daughter and I from probably about 25 years ago, I think it was her first writing lesson. She was scared, and I wasn't even aware that her friend took a photo. And it's always been our favorite photo. And disappointingly, got damaged in water or something like that. But there was enough of it to make out that I could do the painting. And that's the favorite one of our family that I've done. And it's my daughter's favorite too.
I didn't think about that, but that just beats a pair of socks or even an electronic gift computer, because everything has an expiration date. But paintings like that, you would assume that if they love it, it would be with their family forever.
I hope so. I mean, it's funny because I know one of the questions, and I'm stealing a little bit of your thunder because I know one of them is that I've heard on your other interviews is, how do you define success? Which I think is a great question, and it's always tough. But that was the first time I felt successful. And there's obviously a lot of different ways to gauge that. But I looked at my sister, and she, I think, was crying from what I remember. But what really struck me is my dad. I don't think I've ever seen the guy cry. And he was a Cleveland sports fan. And growing up, there was plenty of reasons to cry in the 70s, so I don't think but he's not like he was bawling, but he was he had tears in his eyes, which of course made me almost feel the same way. But it was one of the best feelings I've ever had. And it just was like, okay, this is a good feeling. I want to try to replicate this.
Well, let me ask you, do you have any personal paintings that is your favorite that you've done?
Well, you hit on the one. I think the one of Claire is my favorite portrait I've done. And then I have a whiskey and cigar one that I really like. And that just sold out of the Savannah Gallery. And I really like the circus tent ones too. And I don't really know how to describe or why I like that. There's no great backstory to that. Circuses have just always that 1930s era, of the circus and everything that goes along with it, kind of the Ray Bradbury type of stories and stuff have kind of always fascinated me. But, I would say those are probably a few of my favorite. I just did a guy, I'm looking at it right now, old picture from the 1915s or 19 teens rather, holding a baseball. And I liked how that turned out. But it is interesting because sometimes you'll have the best hopes and then, you think, okay, but for some reason, just some stand out more than others, I guess.
And you're still in the start of your journey as an artist, but is there any long-term goals you want to achieve with your art?
That's a good question too, because I've kind of tried to think about that, because before it kind of felt like I had a roadmap and goals when I started out, not to beat a dead horse, but after painting for about, a year, friends and I, you'd start to hear about art shows and juried shows where we pay to try to get in the show. And then oftentimes you wouldn't even get in. And then, of course, if you're in, then they would award first, second, third, and so on. So at the beginning, my goal was to get in a show. And, several were rejected at the beginning. And then when I started to get in the shows regularly, of course, you know how it is. That's not good enough anymore. You want to just place. And then, I'm embarrassed to say, I'm competitive. So I wanted to win. And my friends and I, again, would have a friendly competition and try to encourage each other and also try to jinx each other from winning, stuff like that. You got this locked up, Bob. And then, of course, he would lose and we'd laugh. So, so that was, I would try to get in shows was my first one. And then I think the goal then became to try to get in a gallery. But I think I'm afraid if I would try to get in another gallery, I really kind of overextend myself. So I don't really have any. I think just maintain, and because if they sell stuff, obviously I have to try to replenish those. So just maintain and keep in the gallery, and then hopefully keep them happy.
All right. So you've listened to the show, so you know that this is the part where I'll start asking questions about you and to get to know you better, just a little bit outside of just your artwork. So,
okay.
And this is one question I've asked in my last episode, and I enjoyed this question. What experience in your past shaped you to be who you are today?
Oh boy. Yeah, I should have been writing down these questions as I listened to your old podcast, right? I already preempted you on the definition of success, so now you're going to try to stump me. Let's see. As far as an artist goes, I think maybe being a lawyer and having to pay attention to detail just kind of has shaped me as far as artist. But as a person, in general, boy, I don't know. Can I phone a friend on that one? Because I'm not coming up with anything good. You can edit that one out, right?
All right, let's ask this question. You've
Sure.
mentioned a couple of artists. Is there any artists that you are particularly a fan of that we should know about or follow?
Yeah, the one again I mentioned was Greg Kreindler, and that's, I think, Kreindler, and Greg is Graig. And if you're a sports fan, you got it. He's on Twitter. That's where I found him. So I'm not sure if he's an Instagram person or not, but his paintings are phenomenal. He's the only artist I've seen in the for what it's worth category, the blue check mark. So this guy is good. I think he does work for Tops and seems like a really nice guy too. I mean, I'm a nobody in the art world, and I messaged him, hey, I loved your painting. In fact, the one with the baseball, the guy holding the baseball was from an image that he also used, and again, a black and white photo from 1915. So I thought I'd give that one a shot. So hopefully he felt the old imitation is the best form of flattery. But he responded, couldn't have been nicer, said, hey, anytime I can help, and, you need advice, whatever, offered to, help me with that. So he seems like a great guy. And then, the nice thing obviously about social media too is you can find people that you think are the best in the world to look at. And so I've followed a couple UK artists that I just love their work. Kate Brinkworth, she does paintings with Coke bottles, and she just makes them so colorful with colorful straws and so big, and just an amazing artist with that. Lee Madgwick, I think it's Madgwick. These hauntingly spooky abandoned houses in the middle of fields and stuff that if somebody described it to me, I'd say, that doesn't really sound that interesting. But you look at this guy's work and they're amazing. I really like Teresa Elliott. She is, I think, at least probably the best cattle painter, horse painter, but she usually does like a lot of cattle and just amazing work. She's in galleries, I think, all over the mid or the West or whatever. And I just love looking at her work. And, again, I think it's always important to look to people that are doing much better than you and see where you can improve on and get better. And those are 4 people that I just love seeing their stuff and would love to have a piece of their stuff, but they might be out of my price range.
No, thanks. I definitely want to check that out, especially that abandoned home. That sounds something like I'd be interested in. So let me ask you this question, and this is going to be outside of art, but I would love to know, since you collect old baseball cards, what did you think about the Mickey Mantle rookie, the PSA 10, just sold for a staggering $5.2 million?
That was crazy because I think before that, and that's the thing. I mean, every kid, every guy rather my age when they were a kid, we heard the same thing from all of our dads, and the story is every dad would say, "Oh, I think I had a Babe Ruth, and I used it on my spokes of my bicycle, or my mom threw it out, or whatever." So every kid in the 70s collected cards, and we swore to ourselves, we're going to hold on to these, and these are going to be what's going to pay for college and, retirement and our kids' weddings. And unfortunately, every kid held on to them and not worth anything, or not worth very much at all. So the ones that have been worth a lot are, I think, the pre-war or thereabouts cards. And I think before that Mantle sold, I may be mistaken, but I think the most expensive one was the Honus Wagner one, which is another one I'm painting now, the 1910 T206. In fact, I put a picture on Instagram, but it was kind of in the rough draft stages of it. But I think that had been the earliest one. So it's just amazing. I think even COVID, because I kind of keep track of the cost of these cards and prices. And I don't know, I know you collect them as well, but have you noticed that during COVID, the prices, I think, literally doubled? I mean, they skyrocketed.
Yes. I don't understand it. You're right. Things are exploding in price. And
yeah.
So what you collect? So I'm gauging from your age. You're obviously collecting prior to your childhood. So do you collect?
Yeah,
do you collect Mantle too?
1910. What?
You also collect Mantle too?
I'm sorry. Do I collect mantles? Is that what you said?
Yeah. Do you also collect Mickey?
No, I don't. The only cards I have are the ones from when I was a kid in the 70s in nice little plastic folders, Johnny Bench, Steve Garvey, and all the Pete Rose and all those guys. And again, I don't think I'm incorrect. I haven't looked at the prices lately, but those aren't worth much at all. But then for some reason in the 90s, I think probably because the T206 series, and I don't know if you're familiar with that series, but it's the ones that came in the cigarette packets, and this the Honus Wagner that everybody's aware of. But all of a sudden that got on my radar, and I didn't know anybody collecting them, and started collecting them then, and kind of trailed off, I guess, again as my kids were little, but probably about 10 years ago, started collecting them again, and then hit pause when I started painting and even started to sell some of them. I'm just kicking myself because I have most of them left, but again, they just really went up in value. So I wish I'd held on to all of them.
Wow. That's so cool. And do you have a pretty big collection?
I do. And it's a set that is impossible to collect, or to complete rather. There's, I think, 4 cards that are impossible to get, the Honus Wagner being one, and I think Eddie Plank is another, and not that it matters about the other 2, but yeah, so I kind of, sorry to turn this into a baseball card collecting thing, but I started off collecting the common ones, and looking back, I wish I would have started with the Hall of Famers or whatever, even though they were more expensive. I started with the cheaper ones, and I realized now the common players don't go up as much, percentage wise, as the good players. But yeah, I do. I get them on eBay, although not lately. And then, it's just kind of fun. Like I said, just to put in a bed and see what happens or whatever. How about you? What do you collect? Am I allowed to ask you a question?
Yeah, I collect basketball cards. And
okay.
I tend to want to, instead of collecting a lot, I tend to pull my money together and get that one massive expensive card, that's
smart. That's a smart way to do it.
Yeah, that's typically how I do it. But Todd, I want to thank you for sharing us your creative journey. I'm really, really blown away. You've only been doing this for 4 years. You're represented by art galleries. Your art is amazing. And where can people connect with you again?
So on Facebook, my art page is called Todd Bergert Art, and that's Bergert, if I didn't spell that before, Todd with 2 Ds. And then on Instagram, it was at Todd Bergert Fine Art. And yeah, that would be the social media. And then the galleries. And I have referenced the galleries in my social media pages, but they're the Dog and Horse Gallery in Charleston and the Grand Bohemian Gallery in Savannah, Georgia.
Thank you. And listeners, make sure you connect with Todd and continue success. Until next time, goodbye.
Hey, thanks, Chris.